What would you do if a man destroyed your reputation just because you said no to him? Lillian Hart lost everything. Her job, her home, her good name. All because she refused to let a powerful man take what was not his to take. With nothing left but the clothes on her back and a mysterious letter she found in a dusty office, she walked 2 days through a blizzard to find a stranger named Cole Whitaker, a widowed rancher drowning in grief. A man who wrote a letter begging the universe for someone kind, then shoved it in a drawer and never sent it. But somehow, that letter found its way to her. Was it fate? Was it his late wife watching over him from heaven? Or was it simply two broken hearts calling out to each other across the miles? When Lillian stumbled into his barn, half frozen and barely alive, neither of them knew that the real storm was just beginning, because the man who destroyed her life was not finished. He was coming for her. And this time she would not face him alone. Stay until the end, because justice is coming, and trust me, it is sweeter than you can imagine. This story reminds us that your worst day does not have to be the end of your story. Sometimes the people who hurt us think they have won. They think their money and their lies make them untouchable. But the truth has a way of catching up. And sometimes, when you feel most alone, that is exactly when help finds you in the most unexpected way. If you have ever been wronged by someone who thought they could get away with it, this story is for you. If you have ever wondered whether good things can still happen after everything falls apart, keep listening. Because Lillian's journey will show you that second chances are real, that justice exists, and that love can find you even when you have stopped looking for it. If this story touches your heart, do me a small favor. Hit that like button so more people can find stories like this one. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever received kindness from a stranger when you needed it most? I would love to hear your story. And if you have not subscribed yet, join our family. We bring you stories every week about strong women, second chances, and the kind of love that does not give up. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their story is not over yet. Now, let us begin. The wind came hard off the flats that night, cutting through the boards of the barn like it had teeth. It rattled the tin roof. It shoved snow in little waves across the frozen ground. The temperature had dropped so low that even the cattle huddled together, their breath rising in thick white clouds. Cole Whitaker stood at the window of his farmhouse watching the storm build. He was 34 years old, but grief had carved lines into his face that made him look older. His hands were rough from years of working the land. His shoulders were broad from hauling feed and mending fences, but his eyes held a kind of emptiness that no amount of hard work could fill. 2 years had passed since Miriam died, 2 years since the fever took her in the span of 3 days, leaving him alone with a little girl who still asked when Mama was coming home. 2 years of silence in a house that had once been filled with laughter. Red, his old hound dog, suddenly lifted his head from the rug near the fire. The dog's ears perked up. Then came a bark, sharp and wrong, the kind of sound that meant something was out of place. Red went still after that, listening for something he did not want to hear. Cole grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. He took the lantern and stepped out into the dark, his boots biting into the packed snow. The cold hit him like a wall. His breath rose in thick clouds. The light swung with each step, throwing gold across fence posts and frozen ruts. The ranch lay quiet under the weight of late winter. Every sound was muffled. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. Cole had learned to trust his instincts out here. When something felt wrong, it usually was. When he pushed open the barn door, the hinge squealed like a warning. Red slipped in first, hackles up, nose working the air. Cole raised the lantern high and froze where he stood. A woman was curled in the hay, knees pulled tight to her chest, coat too thin for a night like this. Snow clung to the hem of her skirt. Her hands were bare, red and swollen from the cold. The skin had split at the knuckles and small traces of blood had dried in the cracks. A battered satchel lay near her boots as if she had dropped it the moment she could not take another step. She lifted her head slowly, and Cole saw eyes that were wide but steady. Not the eyes of someone who had given up, the eyes of someone who had walked through hell and was still standing. "I will go," she said. her voice rough with cold. "I did not mean any trouble. I just needed to get out of the wind." Cole did not answer right away. He had seen fear before. He had seen lies, too. But the look on her face was neither of those things. It was a tired kind of courage, the kind a person wears when there is no other choice left. "You know where you are," he said at last. "Yes," she whispered. "This is your land." The lantern light fell across her face in soft gold. It showed the bluish shadows under her eyes. It showed the frost that had crusted in her dark hair. She could not have been more than 28 or 29 years old, but hardship had etched itself into her features. Red moved closer to the woman. Instead of growling, the old dog pressed his body against her side like he had already decided she was not a threat. Cole's jaw tightened. Red had never been wrong about people. "Who are you?" he asked. She sat up slowly, careful like her limbs might snap if she moved too fast. "My name is Lillian Hart," she said. "I came looking for Cole Whitaker." Hearing his own name in a stranger's mouth felt like a hand closing around his throat. He blinked once, then twice. "You found him." Her eyes flicked to the lantern, then back to his face. "I had a letter," she said. "It had your name on it. No return address, but it said you needed someone kind." The word struck Cole like a shove to the chest. For a moment he could not hear the wind anymore. He could not hear anything except the old silence inside his house. The silence that had lived there since the night Miriam died. That letter. He had written it one night when grief felt like a living thing sitting on his chest. He had sat at the kitchen table with shaking hands while Nora slept in the next room. He had spilled his sorrow onto a page like a man bleeding out. He had asked the world for help. He had asked for someone kind. Then he had folded the paper. He had shoved it into a drawer. He had never meant anyone to see it. "I never sent any letter," Cole said, his voice low and rough. Lillian's mouth pulled into a small, crooked half-smile that held no joy, only wonder. "Maybe someone else did," she said. "Or maybe it just found its way. I do not know." Cole stared at her. The truth was, he did not know either. But he knew one thing for certain. If he shut that barn door again, this woman would not last the night. Lillian tried to stand. Her knees buckled for half a second before Red braced against her, steady as a fence post. Cole moved without thinking. He caught her elbow and felt how thin she was under that worn coat. Her bones felt like bird bones, fragile, ready to break. "You do not have to go back out there," he said, and surprised himself with how firm it came out. "Come inside." She looked at him like she was weighing a risk. Like she had learned the hard way that kindness sometimes carried a price tag. But the cold was winning. Her body was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "There is a child," she said quietly. A warning or a question, Cole was not sure which. "My daughter," he answered. "Her name is Nora. She is 5 years old." Lillian nodded once, accepting this information. "All right," she said, "just for the night." They crossed the yard in silence, the wind tugging at their coats. Snow squeaked under their boots. The house stood dark and plain against the white land, a square shape that looked too big for one man and a little girl. Cole opened the door and stepped aside. Lillian hesitated for one breath, standing on the threshold like it was a line she might never cross back over. Then she stepped inside. The fire still held a low glow. The smell of old wood smoke and beef stew lingered in the air. A small cloth rabbit sat crooked on the rocking chair near the hearth, one ear bent at a funny angle. Cole saw Lillian's eyes land on it, and something in her face softened. He motioned to the table. She removed her coat slowly, like the motion hurt. Her sleeves were frayed at the wrists. Her fingers trembled as she set her satchel down. Cole went to the stove without speaking. He ladled stew into a bowl, pushed it toward her, then set a tin cup of water beside it. Lillian ate like a woman who had learned to make food last. Small bites, slow chews, no waste. When she finished, she lowered the spoon and looked down at the empty bowl like she could not believe it was real. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost too quiet to catch. Cole nodded once. "There is a spare room down the hall," he said. "It belonged to my wife." He expected her to flinch at the word wife. Most people did, like it was something sharp that might cut them. But Lillian only lifted her eyes and held his gaze. "I am sorry," she said, "for your loss." The words were plain, but they did not feel rehearsed. They felt like something she actually meant. Cole cleared his throat because grief had a way of rising without warning. He watched her gather her satchel and stand, moving careful but steadier now that warmth had reached her bones. At the hallway entrance, she paused and looked back. "That letter," she said softly. "It might not have been sent the right way, but it reached me the same." Then she disappeared into the dark corridor. Cole stood in the kitchen for a long time, one hand on the back of a chair, the other wrapped around his empty coffee mug. The house was still quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the dead quiet he had lived with for 2 years. This was a quiet with another breath inside it. A soft creak sounded from the hallway, and he turned. Nora stood there in her nightgown, hair wild from sleep, the cloth rabbit clutched to her chest. Her eyes were big and careful, the way a child's eyes get when they have learned too much too early. "Daddy," she whispered. "Who is here?" Cole walked to her and knelt so his face was level with hers. He brushed snow dampness from his beard with the back of his hand. "A woman needed help," he said gently. "Just for tonight." Nora's gaze flicked past him toward the hallway where Lillian had gone. "Is she nice?" she asked. Cole did not answer fast. He listened not to the wind outside, but to something deeper, something in his own chest that had been silent for a very long time. "I think she is," he said at last. Nora hugged the rabbit tighter. "Mama was nice," she whispered, like she was testing the word. The name landed heavy between them. Cole swallowed hard against the knot in his throat. "Yes," he said, "your mama was." Nora nodded once, solemn as a little judge. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his shoulder for a brief moment, the way she always did when she wanted comfort, but did not want to ask for it. Cole held her gently, careful not to squeeze too tight. His eyes drifted to the hallway where Lillian had gone. He did not know what morning would bring. He only knew the wind was still howling outside, and for the first time in 2 long years, someone else was under his roof. And if the past had truly sent that letter to his door, what else might it be ready to send next? The morning came in slow and gray, as if the sky itself was not sure it wanted to wake up. Frost glazed the windows in white fern shapes. The stove had burned down to coals. Cole Whitaker stood at the counter with his sleeves rolled up, stirring oatmeal that stuck at the bottom of the pot. The smell was plain, but it was warm. And warmth mattered in late winter. The kitchen had been built for more voices than it held now. After Miriam died, the rooms had felt too wide, like the house itself was waiting for someone who would never come back. For 2 years, Cole had rattled around in the silence like a stone in an empty jar. But this morning, with a stranger sleeping down the hall, the air felt different. Not crowded, just paused, like a breath held between 2 heartbeats. He set 3 bowls on the table before he could stop himself. The third one sat there like a question he was not ready to answer. Red lay by the hearth, tail thumping once against the floor, then going still. The old dog seemed to know something was different. He kept lifting his head and looking toward the hallway, ears perked like he was waiting. Nora padded in wearing her nightgown and 1 wool sock. She had lost the other one somewhere in her blankets. Her hair stood up in wild corners that made her look like a baby bird. She climbed into her chair and tucked her legs under her, the way she always did when she felt unsure about something. "Is she still here?" Nora asked, her voice small. Cole slid a bowl of oatmeal toward his daughter. "Yes," he said. "She is still here." Nora stared at the hallway, then at her oatmeal, then back at the hallway again. Her cloth rabbit sat on the table next to her, one bent ear flopping over. Before Cole could say anything else, the spare room door opened with a soft click. Lillian Hart stepped into the kitchen like she had been trying to make no sound at all. Her hair was braided back now, neat and practical. Her cheeks were still red from the cold of the night before, but the stiffness in her shoulders had eased some. She had washed her face. She looked less like a storm-blown shadow and more like a real person. She stopped when she saw Nora sitting at the table. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lillian's expression softened. She lowered her hands and showed her empty palms without even thinking about it, like she wanted the child to know she meant no harm. "Morning," Lillian said gently. Nora blinked at her. Her thumb grazed her bottom lip, a nervous habit she had never outgrown. She did not smile, but she did not hide either. "Morning," Nora whispered back. Cole watched their faces like a man watching a gate swing in the wind. One wrong push and it could slam shut forever. He cleared his throat. "You sleep all right?" he asked Lillian. She nodded. "As good as I can. Thank you for the bed." Her gaze found the third bowl on the table, then lifted to meet Cole's eyes. In them was that same quiet caution from the barn, the look of someone who had learned not to expect anything. "You do not have to feed me," she said. Cole set another spoon down beside the bowl. "You walked 2 days in snow," he answered. "Eat." She hesitated for just a second. Then she sat down at the table, her movements neat and careful. Not out of fancy manners, but out of habit. Like she had learned that the world did not forgive carelessness. They ate mostly in silence. It was not an awkward silence. It was the quiet of tired people sharing a table, each of them listening for trouble that did not come. When Nora finished her oatmeal, she pushed her bowl forward and stood up from her chair. She grabbed her rabbit and hovered near Lillian's side, her eyes fixed on the braid that hung down Lillian's back. "You made that?" Nora asked, pointing at the braid. Lillian touched it once with her fingers. "Yes," she said. "It keeps it out of the way." Nora reached out like she wanted to touch it, then stopped herself. She backed away and padded down the hall to get dressed, leaving the two adults alone. When the little girl was gone, Cole spoke in a low voice. "You really came out here because of that letter?" Lillian's spoon paused in midair. She set it down and nodded once. "Yes." "How did you get it?" Cole asked. Part of him did not want the answer. Part of him needed it more than air. Lillian folded her hands on the edge of the table. "There is a placement office in Kansas City," she said. "Not an official one. Not proper. More like a room behind a dry goods store with a woman who keeps stacks of old papers." Cole felt heat creep up his neck. He hated the idea of strangers reading words he had written in the dark of his worst nights. "She said she had old mail," Lillian continued. "Letters from men who wrote asking for help and never heard back. She said yours had no reply. She told me it might not even be real anymore. The man who wrote it might have moved on or passed away." Cole stared at the table, his jaw tightened. "I did not want that letter to exist," he admitted. "I understand," Lillian said softly, "but it did." Cole looked up at her. "Why you?" he asked. "Of all the people who could have picked up that letter, why did you walk 2 days through a blizzard to find a stranger?" Lillian's mouth tightened. She did not look away. "Because I needed a place where someone did not already know my worst day," she said. The words hung in the air between them. Cole's jaw clenched. He recognized something in her voice. The sound of someone carrying a weight too heavy to put down. "What happened?" he asked. Lillian held his gaze for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. "Not today," she said. Cole nodded once, accepting the boundary without argument. He knew what it was to have a story that hurt too much to touch. After breakfast, Lillian began gathering the dishes from the table. Cole moved to stop her out of instinct, but she shook her head before he could speak. "I can work," she said simply. "I am not here to be carried." Her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows now. Her arms were thin, but her hands were steady. She washed while Cole dried, the sound of water and clinking tin filling the kitchen in a way that felt almost normal. For just a moment, Cole could close his eyes and pretend this was how things had always been. Outside, the snow had softened in patches. The sun was pale, hanging low like a dull coin. In the yard, the top layer had started to melt, making the ground slick with mud and slush. The back gate had come loose again, the hinge pulling away from the post like it was tired of holding on. Cole grabbed his coat and gloves from the hook by the door. "I need to fix the gate," he said. Lillian reached for her thin coat, too. "You do not need to," he started to say. "I would like to," she replied. Her voice was not sharp, just certain. "I can hold nails. I can hand tools. It is not much, but it is something." Cole did not argue. He just nodded. They walked out together into the cold morning air. It was so sharp it made the inside of his nose sting with each breath. At the gate, Cole took out his hammer and a handful of nails. Lillian knelt beside the broken post and held the board steady without being asked. Her fingers were still raw and cracked, but she did not flinch. Red circled once, then lay down in the snow and watched them work like an old foreman, making sure the job got done right. Cole worked in silence, and Lillian matched it. She did not fill the air with nervous words to prove she belonged. She just did what needed doing. Nora wandered outside after a while, bundled up in her coat and boots. She was dragging her cloth doll behind her, the one with the yellow yarn hair. The doll's arm was loose, hanging by a single thread. She stopped a few feet away from where Cole and Lillian were working. Her eyes were fixed on the broken doll. Lillian noticed first. She paused her work, wiped her hands on her skirt, and crouched down to Nora's level. "That doll looks tired," Lillian said gently. Nora looked down at it. Her lower lip trembled just a little. "Her arm is broke," she mumbled. Lillian held out her hand. "May I?" she asked. Nora hesitated. The doll had been a gift from Miriam. Letting a stranger touch it felt like a big decision for a 5-year-old. But something in Lillian's face must have seemed safe, because Nora placed the doll into Lillian's palms like she was handing over something precious. Lillian reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small needle wrapped in paper and a bit of brown thread. Cole's eyebrows lifted. Not many women carried sewing tools in their coat pocket. Then again, not many women walked alone for 2 days through a blizzard. Lillian stitched the doll's arm back on with quick, careful movements, her brow furrowed with focus. When she finished, she tugged the thread tight and tied it off with a neat little knot. "Every doll deserves a second chance," Lillian said, handing it back. Nora stared at the doll's arm, now firmly attached. Then she looked up at Lillian with something new in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Lillian smiled softly and nodded like it was nothing special. But Cole had seen the way her eyes changed, and he felt something shift in his own chest. Not pain this time. Something else. Something that felt like the first crack of light after a long, dark night. The days began to warm by inches. The snow did not vanish all at once. It softened. It sank. It turned to wet patches that showed the brown earth beneath like old scars finally healing. The creek behind the ranch began to move again, water trickling under the thin crust of ice. Fence posts leaned where the frost had pushed them crooked. Mud clung to boots and would not let go. Lillian stayed. What started as one night turned into 2, then 3, then a week. Nobody talked about it much. Nobody made any official announcements. She just kept being there when Cole woke up in the morning, and she kept being there when he came in from the barn at night. She and Cole worked side by side without making a show of it. She cleaned out the pantry and found jars that Miriam had labeled in her careful handwriting. Blackberry jam, 1873, pickled beans, summer batch. Lillian did not touch them like they were hers. She touched them like they mattered, like she understood that some things hold more than what is inside the glass. Cole noticed. He said nothing, but in his mind it counted. When Nora asked questions about Miriam, Lillian did not hush her or change the subject. She listened. She let Nora talk, even when the words came out tangled and sad and did not make much sense. Cole heard it from the hallway one evening. He had stopped to take off his muddy boots and heard their voices coming from the kitchen. "Did you know my mama?" Nora was asking. Lillian's answer was simple and gentle. "No," she said, "but I know she loved you very much." I can see it in this house. I can see it in the way your daddy keeps her things. I can see it in the way you hold that rabbit she made you." Cole stood frozen in the hallway. His throat felt tight. That was the first time his grief loosened instead of tightened, like someone had finally given him permission to remember Miriam without drowning in the memory. Later that evening, Cole found Lillian sitting on the porch. The sun was going down, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. She was staring out at the tree line like she was looking for something that was not there. He sat down beside her. The porch rail was rough beneath his work gloves. "You said you needed a place where no one knew your worst day," he said quietly. "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to. But I am listening if you ever do." Lillian's fingers traced the porch rail once, slow and thoughtful. "I worked in a store," she began. Her voice was steady, but her eyes looked far away. Dry goods and cloth. It was in Kansas City. The owner was a man named Orson Pritchard. His wife got sick, so I stayed late to help with the extra work. Cole said nothing. He just waited. "At first it was only extra hours," Lillian continued. "Then it was extra favors. He would ask me to stay after closing. He would find reasons to be near me when no one else was around." Cole's stomach tightened. He had a feeling he knew where this story was going. He started thinking my kindness meant I owed him something, Lillian said. Her jaw hardened. "When I said no to him, he took the job away. He took the room I rented behind the store. He told everyone I was ungrateful. He told them I was trouble. He told them I tried to steal from him." Cole's hands curled into fists at his sides. Lillian's voice stayed steady, but there was a tremor underneath it. "There were not many doors left after that," she finished. "Not ones I could knock on without losing what little pride I still had." Cole breathed out slow through his nose. He understood that kind of loss. Not the same shape as his own grief, but the same crushing weight. Dignity stolen in a quiet way. No raised voices, no witnesses. Just a powerful man deciding that a woman's reputation was his to destroy. "This place is not much," Cole said at last. His voice came out rough. Lillian looked at him, really looked at him. "Then it is honest," she replied. "That is more than most." They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the last light fade from the sky. Red came and lay at their feet, his old bones creaking as he settled down. Cole did not reach for her hand. It was too soon for that. But he moved a little closer on the bench, and he felt her do the same. That night, Lillian peeled potatoes at the kitchen table while Nora chattered beside her about a chicken that had chased her around the yard that afternoon. Cole sat near the fire, not saying much, just listening, just watching. He watched Lillian's hands move, quick and sure with the peeling knife. He watched the way Nora leaned closer to her without even realizing she was doing it, like a flower turning towards sunlight. After supper, Lillian washed the dishes while humming a soft melody. It was not a song Cole recognized. It was just a low tune, the kind meant for a child or a lonely room. When Nora grew sleepy, Lillian helped her wash up. She combed the tangles out of Nora's hair with gentle fingers. She guided the little girl to bed and pulled the blankets up under her chin. Cole stood in the hallway, not quite sure what to do with the tight feeling in his chest. He heard Lillian's voice through the cracked bedroom door, gentle and calm. "Good night, Nora." Nora mumbled something back. Then there was a pause. "Will you be here in the morning?" Nora whispered. Cole's breath caught. Lillian answered without hesitation. "Yes. If your father says I can." Cole stepped into the doorway. Lillian turned and met his eyes. There was a quiet question in her face, an asking without words. Nora's eyes were half closed, the cloth rabbit tucked under her chin. But Cole could tell she was listening, waiting. Lillian spoke softly. "Would it be all right if I stayed until the road clears? Just until the storm passes for good?" Cole felt the ranch around him, the empty rooms, The old ache, the chance of trouble, the chance of warmth. He did not hesitate. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. Lillian's shoulders dropped just a fraction, just enough to show how hard she had been holding herself up all this time. She nodded once. "Thank you." Cole stood there a moment longer, watching Nora's small hand reach out from under the blankets. Without thinking, Lillian took it and held it gently until the little girl's breathing evened out into sleep. Cole turned away before his throat could close up completely. He walked back down the hall, the floorboards creaking under his boots. He stopped at the old writing desk in the corner of the front room. His hand hovered over the drawer. He could almost feel the folded letter inside it, like it had a pulse of its own. Outside, the wind picked up again, tapping against the window like a knuckle asking to come in. And for the first time, Cole wondered if the letter was not the only thing from the past that might come knocking at his door. Spring was trying to break through. The worst of the snow had melted, leaving the roads rutted with ice and slush. The sky hung low and gray most days, but every now and then, the sun would push through and turn the whole ranch gold for an hour or two. Cole decided it was time to go into town for supplies. The flour was low. The lamp oil was almost gone. Nora needed new boots because she had outgrown her old ones and was stuffing rags in the toes to make them fit. He hitched the wagon and looked at Lillian, who was standing on the porch with her thin coat wrapped tight around her shoulders. "You should stay here," she said. Her voice was careful. "I can manage the ranch for a few hours. You do not need any trouble in town on account of me." Cole checked the harness on the horse before he answered. "If you are going to stay on this ranch," he said, "you do not have to hide like you did something wrong." Lillian's eyes flickered with something that might have been fear. Then it passed, replaced by that steady courage he was beginning to recognize. "All right," she said quietly. Nora came bouncing out of the house, her cloth rabbit tucked under one arm and excitement all over her face. She had been asking to go to town for weeks. The promise of peppermint sticks from the general store had her practically dancing. The ride to Cedar Hollow took about 2 hours. The town sat low in a bend of land where the wind always seemed to find its way through. It was not much to look at. A main street with a dozen buildings, a church with a white steeple, a blacksmith, a saloon, and Mrs. Grady's general store, which sold everything from flour to fabric. When they pulled up in front of the store, Cole helped Nora down from the wagon first, then offered his hand to Lillian. She took it briefly, just long enough to steady herself, then let go. The bell above the door rang when they walked in. The air inside was warm and smelled of flour and dried herbs. Sunlight came through the front windows and made dust motes dance. Mrs. Grady stood behind the counter, a stout woman with gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that never missed anything. She smiled when she saw Cole come through the door. "Mr. Whitaker," she said cheerfully. "Good to see you out and about. And little Miss Nora, my goodness, you have grown a whole inch since Christmas." Nora grinned and showed off a gap where she had recently lost a tooth. Then Mrs. Grady's smile stopped cold. Her eyes had landed on Lillian. "Well," she said, and her voice changed. It got that sugary sweet tone that people use when they are about to say something ugly. "If it is not Lillian Hart." Lillian went completely still beside Cole. He felt the change in the air like a sudden drop in temperature. "You know her?" Cole asked. He kept his voice calm and even, though his gut was already tightening. Mrs. Grady folded her arms across her chest. "I know of her," she said. "Kansas City dry goods store. Trouble followed that girl around like a stray dog." Cole saw Lillian's jaw tighten. Her hands had curled into fists at her sides, but she did not speak. She held her ground. Nora looked up at her father with confusion on her small face. She did not understand what was happening, only that the mood had changed and the candy suddenly seemed very far away. Mrs. Grady's gaze slid from Lillian to Nora, then back to Cole. "That your little one?" she asked. There was something in her voice that Cole did not like. Something probing and mean. Cole rested his hand on Nora's shoulder, firm and protective. "Yes," he said simply. Mrs. Grady's mouth moved like she wanted to say more, like she was trying to figure out just how much poison she could pour into this conversation. Cole did not give her the chance. He stepped closer to the counter, putting himself between Mrs. Grady and Lillian. "We are here for seed, flour, and lamp oil," he said. His voice was quiet but hard as iron. "Not stories." Mrs. Grady's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then she turned and began gathering the supplies, her movements stiff with disapproval. She rang up the purchases without another word, but her eyes kept sliding back to Lillian like she was memorizing every detail for later gossip. Outside, Lillian's hands were shaking as she climbed into the wagon. Just a slight tremor, but enough for Cole to notice. He loaded the supplies in the back, then climbed up beside her. Nora sat between them, quiet now, picking at a loose thread on her rabbit's ear. Once they were out of town and the buildings had shrunk to small shapes behind them, Cole spoke. "You want to tell me what she meant back there?" Lillian stared straight ahead at the road. Her face was hard, but there was pain underneath. "She meant to hurt me," Lillian said flatly. "That man," Cole pressed gently, "the store owner, Pritchard." Lillian was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the wagon wheels crunching through the slush. Then she started to talk. "His name was Orson Pritchard. He owned the dry goods store in Kansas City where I worked. He was respected. People in town thought he was a good Christian man, a family man." Her voice got tight. "When I said no to his advances, he made sure I paid for it. He told everyone I stole from him. He told people I was the one who tempted him, that I threw myself at him and got angry when he rejected me." Cole felt his blood heat up. His grip on the reins tightened. "You did not steal," he said. It was not a question. Lillian turned to look at him, and for the first time there was fire in her eyes. "I walked out of that store with nothing but my coat, my needle, and what was left of my pride," she said firmly. "Nothing else. Not a single penny that did not belong to me." Cole nodded once. "All right," he said. They rode in silence for a while longer. The sun broke through the clouds and warmed their faces. Eventually, Nora fell asleep against Cole's arm, her rabbit clutched tight. Lillian spoke again, so quietly Cole almost missed it. "Pritchard has friends everywhere," she said. "He probably knows I came west. Men like him do not let go easy. They need to win. They need everyone to believe their version of the story." Cole kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Let him come," he said. His voice was steady and sure. "If he wants to tell lies about you, he can do it to my face." Lillian looked at him for a long moment. "You barely know me," she said. Cole glanced down at Nora, sleeping peaceful against his side. Then he looked at Lillian. "I know enough," he said. The trouble came 3 days later, riding up the drive just as the sun was setting. Cole was in the barn checking on the mare when Red started growling low in his throat. Not a bark, a growl, the kind that meant danger was coming. Cole set down the brush and walked to the barn door. He saw a rider coming up the muddy track. Not a neighbor, not anyone he knew. A man in a dark coat with his hat pulled low against the evening chill. Mud caked his boots and the flanks of his horse. He carried a folded paper in one hand like it was a weapon that did not need a blade. Cole stepped out of the barn and met him in the yard. "You Cole Whitaker?" the man asked. "Yes?" The rider dismounted and held out the paper. "Name is Harlan Tate, deputy from Cedar Hollow. I was asked to deliver this." Cole took the paper and unfolded it. He read it by the fading light. It was not a warrant, not exactly. It was a notice, a formal-looking document with official stamps and fancy writing. But the meaning was plain enough. Orson Pritchard's name was on it. The paper said that Lillian Hart was wanted for questioning regarding the theft of goods from Pritchard's store. It said that anyone knowingly sheltering her might be considered to be aiding wrongdoing and could face legal consequences. Cole's hand tightened around the paper until the edges crumpled. Lillian had come out onto the porch when she heard the horse. She had Nora's coat wrapped around the little girl's shoulders, both of them standing in the doorway. Nora was peeking out from behind Lillian's skirt like a rabbit hiding in tall grass. Deputy Tate looked past Cole at Lillian. He lifted his chin. "Ma'am," he said, "you are the one named in that paper." Lillian's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady as rock. "I did not steal from him," she said clearly. Deputy Tate shrugged like the truth was not his job. "I do not decide that," he replied. "I just deliver what I am told to deliver." Cole stepped forward, putting himself between the deputy and Lillian. He stood with his feet planted wide and his shoulders squared. "This is my land," Cole said. "She is under my roof." Deputy Tate's eyes narrowed. "You want to make this harder than it needs to be?" Cole's voice dropped low and dangerous. "No," he said. "Do you want to make it easy for a bad man to keep hurting an innocent woman?" The deputy shifted his weight. He was not a young man, and Cole could see in his face that he was tired of being in the middle of other people's problems. "Folks in town say she brings trouble," Deputy Tate said, like it was some kind of warning. Cole looked back at Lillian for one long moment. He saw her fear. He saw her pride. He saw Nora standing beside her, clutching that cloth rabbit, and watching the way grown people decide what kind of world a child will live in. Then Cole faced the deputy again. "Folks in town can say whatever they want," he said. "If Orson Pritchard has a problem with this woman, he can ride out here himself and bring something real. A real judge. A real warrant. Not gossip and fancy paper." He took one step closer to the deputy. "Until then, you are going to climb back on that horse and ride out the way you came. This conversation is finished." Deputy Tate stared at Cole for a long, hard moment. He was measuring the man in front of him, weighing whether this was worth a fight. Finally, he shook his head and tucked his thumbs in his belt. "This is not over," he said. "Pritchard has money and connections. He will not let this drop." Then he climbed back on his horse and turned toward the road. Cole watched him ride until the dark swallowed horse and rider both. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. Behind him, Lillian spoke. Her voice was strained tight as a wire about to snap. "I should go," she said. "I will not bring this down on you and Nora." Cole turned around to face her. "You are not a storm," he said. "You are a person." Lillian shook her head. Her eyes were wet, but she would not let the tears fall. "You do not know what men like Pritchard do when they lose," she whispered. "He will not stop. He cannot stop. His pride will not let him." Cole walked up the porch steps until he was standing right in front of her. "I know what loss does to a person," he said quietly, "and I know what it does not excuse. He does not get to chase you forever just because he could not handle the word no." Lillian's throat worked. She was trying hard not to cry. "I did not come here to ruin your peace," she said. Cole looked past her into the house where Nora stood in the doorway. The little girl's eyes were wet. Her cheeks were smudged where she had wiped at them with her sleeve. Nora took one small step forward. "Please do not go," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I do not like it when people leave." The words hung in the cold air like something fragile and holy. Lillian's face crumpled. She knelt down and pulled Nora into her arms, holding the child like she was the most precious thing in the world. Cole stood over both of them, his chest tight with emotion. Not grief this time. Fear. The fear of losing something he had not even let himself name yet. He made a decision in that moment. The kind of decision a man only gets to make a few times in his life. "Nobody is leaving," he said firmly. "We are going to face this together." Lillian looked up at him, still holding Nora close. "How?" she asked. Cole reached down and took the crumpled paper from where he had dropped it on the porch. "Tomorrow," he said, "we go to Cedar Hollow. We talk to the sheriff, not the deputy, the sheriff himself, and we tell him your side of the story." "But Pritchard has money," Lillian protested. "He has influence. People believe him." Cole's jaw tightened. "Then we make them believe you," he said. "We find people who know the truth. We find evidence. We do whatever it takes." Lillian searched his face for a long moment. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you do this for me?" Cole swallowed hard. He thought about Miriam. He thought about all the empty days and silent nights. He thought about the letter he wrote in his darkest hour, asking the world for someone kind. "Because you showed up," he said. "Because that letter found its way to you for a reason. And because my daughter is holding on to you like you are the first safe thing she has felt in 2 years." He paused, his voice rough. "I am not going to let that be taken away. Not by Pritchard. Not by anyone." Lillian's eyes filled with tears. This time, she let them fall. The ride to Cedar Hollow the next morning felt longer than usual. The sky was gray and heavy, threatening rain. Cole sat stiff in the wagon seat, his rifle tucked beside him just in case. Lillian sat next to him, pale but determined. Nora stayed home with old Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring farm, the only person Cole trusted enough to leave his daughter with. The sheriff's office was at the end of the main street, a small building with a wooden sign that creaked in the wind. Sheriff Thomas Garrett was a man in his 50s with white hair and a weathered face that had seen plenty of trouble over the years. He was known for being fair, which was more than could be said for his deputy. Cole and Lillian walked through the door together. Sheriff Garrett looked up from his desk, his eyebrows rising when he saw them. "Cole Whitaker," he said. "Been a while. And you must be the woman everyone is talking about." Lillian stood tall. "My name is Lillian Hart," she said clearly, "and I am here to tell you the truth." The sheriff leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "All right," he said. "I am listening." For the next hour, Lillian told her story from the beginning. She told the sheriff about her job at Pritchard's store, about the extra hours and the way Pritchard started finding excuses to be alone with her, about the night he cornered her in the back room and she pushed him away. She told him about losing her job the next day, about being kicked out of her room, about the rumors that spread through town like wildfire, all of them lies that Pritchard had started to cover his own shame. Sheriff Garrett listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That is a serious accusation against a respected businessman," he said finally. "I know," Lillian replied. "And I know he has money and I do not. But everything I have told you is true." The sheriff turned to Cole. "And you believe her?" Cole nodded once. "I have watched her for weeks now," he said. "I have seen the way she works without complaint. I have seen the way she treats my daughter. I have seen fear in her eyes, Sheriff, but I have never seen dishonesty." Sheriff Garrett drummed his fingers on the desk. "Pritchard filed an official complaint," he said. "Claims you stole $30 worth of merchandise and ran off in the night." Lillian's jaw tightened. "I left with nothing but my coat and my sewing kit," she said. "He can search my belongings. He can search my whole life. He will not find anything that does not belong to me." The sheriff studied her face for a long moment. Then he stood up and grabbed his hat. "I am going to send a telegram to Kansas City," he said. "I have a friend who works the constable's office there. If Pritchard made this complaint official, there will be records. And if there are other women who had similar problems with him, there might be records of that too." Lillian's eyes widened. "You believe me?" Sheriff Garrett paused at the door. "I believe in finding out the truth," he said. "And I have been doing this job long enough to know that sometimes the loudest accusers are the ones with the most to hide." He looked at Cole. "Keep her safe until I have some answers. Might take a week or two." Cole nodded. "She is not going anywhere," he said. The ride home felt different, lighter somehow. Lillian sat close beside Cole on the wagon seat, and he did not move away. "You really think there might be other women?" Lillian asked quietly. Cole kept his eyes on the road. "A man like Pritchard does not try something like that just once," he said. "Someone will talk eventually." Lillian was silent for a moment. "I spent so long thinking nobody would believe me," she said. "I thought I would have to carry this alone forever." Cole glanced at her. "You are not alone anymore," he said simply. When they got back to the ranch, Nora came running out of the house so fast she nearly tripped over her own feet. Mrs. Patterson waved from the porch, looking relieved to see them. "That child asked me about 40 times when you would be back," the old woman said with a chuckle. "I think she was worried." Nora threw herself at Lillian's legs and hugged tight. "You came back," the little girl said. Lillian knelt down and smoothed the wild hair from Nora's face. "I told you I would," she said softly. "I always keep my promises." Cole watched them together. His chest felt full in a way it had not felt in a very long time. That night, after Nora was asleep, Cole and Lillian sat on the porch together watching the stars come out. The air was cold, but neither of them wanted to go inside. Cole pulled out the old letter from his pocket, the one he had written on his darkest night. He unfolded it and looked at the words by the light from the window. "I wrote this 2 years ago," he said. "After Miriam died. I felt like I was drowning. I asked the world for help. I asked for someone kind." Lillian looked at the worn paper. "And you never sent it." Cole shook his head. "Someone did," he said. "I do not know who, but it found its way to you." Lillian reached out and touched the edge of the letter gently. "Maybe Miriam sent it," she said softly. "Maybe she wanted you to be happy again." Cole's throat tightened. He had never thought of it that way. "Maybe," he said. They sat in silence for a while. Then Cole folded the letter and put it away. "I need to ask you something," he said. His voice was rough. Lillian turned to look at him. "When this is over," he continued, "when Pritchard gets what he deserves, and you are free, will you stay?" Lillian's breath caught. "Stay," she repeated. Cole nodded. "Not because you have nowhere else to go," he said. "Not because you need shelter. But because you want to. Because this could be your home. Because Nora loves you. And because I think I might be starting to feel something I had not expected to feel again." Lillian's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of sadness. "Are you asking me what I think you are asking?" she whispered. Cole reached over and took her hand in his. "I am asking you to build a life with me," he said. "Whatever that looks like, however long it takes. I am asking you to stay." Lillian squeezed his hand. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will stay." 2 weeks passed. Spring finally broke through for real. The trees budded out in pale green. The creek ran clear and fast. The whole ranch seemed to wake up from a long sleep. Then the telegram arrived. Sheriff Garrett rode out to deliver it himself. He found Cole and Lillian working together in the vegetable garden, turning over the soil for planting. Nora was nearby, carefully placing seeds in the rows Lillian had shown her how to dig. The sheriff dismounted and walked toward them with a paper in his hand. His face was serious, but there was something else there, too. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Got word from Kansas City," he said. Cole stood up and brushed the dirt from his hands. Lillian rose beside him, her face pale with worry. "And?" she asked. Sheriff Garrett held up the telegram. "Seems you were not the first woman Orson Pritchard tried to ruin," he said. "My friend did some digging. Found 3 other women who had similar stories. One of them even tried to press charges 5 years ago, but Pritchard paid off the right people and it went away." Lillian's hand flew to her mouth. "3 others," she whispered. The sheriff nodded. "All of them were young women who worked for him. All of them said no. All of them lost their jobs and their reputations." Cole felt rage building in his chest. "So what happens now?" he asked. Sheriff Garrett folded the telegram and tucked it in his pocket. "Now we have a pattern," he said. "1 accusation is easy to dismiss. 4 accusations start to look like truth. I have already sent word to the marshal's office. They are going to investigate Pritchard properly. All his business dealings, all his complaints, everything." Lillian was shaking. Cole put his arm around her shoulders to steady her. "What about the complaint against me?" she asked. Sheriff Garrett smiled for the first time. "Officially withdrawn," he said. "Turns out Pritchard got nervous when he heard the marshal was involved. He sent a telegram this morning saying there must have been some misunderstanding and he wanted to drop the whole matter." Lillian made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "He is scared," she said. "He should be," the sheriff replied. "Men like that, they think money makes them untouchable." But eventually, the truth catches up. Cole shook the sheriff's hand. "Thank you," he said, "for believing her, for looking into it." Sheriff Garrett nodded. "I have daughters of my own," he said. "I would want someone to fight for them." After the sheriff left, Lillian stood in the garden for a long time, just staring at the sky. Cole let her have her moment. Some victories need time to sink in. Finally, she turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "It is over," she said. "He cannot hurt me anymore." Cole pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "No," he said against her hair. "He cannot." Nora came running over, alarmed by the tears. "Why is Lillian crying?" she asked. "Is she sad?" Lillian knelt down and smiled at the little girl through her tears. "No, sweetheart," she said. "I am happy. Sometimes people cry when they are very, very happy." Nora thought about that for a moment. Then she wrapped her small arms around Lillian's neck. "Good," she said. "I do not like it when you are sad." That evening, word came that Orson Pritchard had been arrested. The marshal's investigation had turned up more than just accusations. They found evidence of fraud in his business records, fake receipts, stolen goods he had blamed on employees, a whole pattern of lies stretching back years. He was taken away in handcuffs, and the people of Kansas City finally saw him for what he truly was. The weeks that followed felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into sunlight. Lillian moved through the world differently now. Her shoulders were no longer hunched. Her eyes no longer darted toward every sound like she was expecting trouble. She laughed more. She sang while she worked. She let herself be happy without waiting for it to be taken away. Cole watched the transformation with wonder. He had fallen in love with her strength during the hard times. Now he was falling in love with her joy. Nora blossomed too. She followed Lillian everywhere, chattering constantly about everything and nothing. She started calling Lillian by name instead of that lady, which felt like a victory all on its own. One evening, Cole found Lillian sitting by Miriam's grave behind the house. It was a simple marker under an old oak tree with wildflowers starting to bloom around it. He hesitated, not wanting to intrude. Lillian looked up and saw him. "I hope you do not mind," she said softly. I wanted to thank her. Cole walked over and sat down beside her in the grass. "Thank her for what?" he asked. Lillian looked at the gravestone. "For raising a good man," she said. "For loving Nora so well that the little girl still knows what love feels like. And maybe," she paused, "maybe for sending that letter." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Miriam would have liked you," he said finally. "She always said she could tell what kind of person someone was by watching them with children and animals. You passed both tests the first night." Lillian smiled. "Red did seem to trust me right away," she said. As if on cue, the old hound came wandering around the corner of the house. He walked straight to Lillian and lay down with his head on her lap, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Cole laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from deep in the chest. He could not remember the last time he had laughed like that. "I think we have a witness for the wedding," he said. Lillian looked at him sharply. "Wedding," she repeated. Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring. It was simple, just a thin gold band with a tiny stone that caught the fading light. It had been his grandmother's. "I was going to wait for a more proper moment," he said. "But sitting here with you and Miriam and Red, this feels right." He turned to face her fully. "Lillian Hart," he said, "you walked into my life in the middle of a blizzard, carrying a letter I never sent, looking for a man who did not know he needed to be found. You have made my daughter laugh again. You have made my house feel like a home again. You have made me believe that maybe the story is not over yet." His voice caught. "Will you marry me?" Lillian's eyes were shining. She reached out and took the ring from his palm. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times, yes." Cole slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, gentle and sure, right there in front of Miriam's grave and the old oak tree and the setting sun. When they walked back to the house, Nora was waiting on the porch. She took one look at their faces and started jumping up and down. "Did you ask her?" she shouted at her father. "Did you ask her to marry you?" Cole grinned. "How did you know about that?" Nora rolled her eyes in that way only children can. "I helped you pick out the ring, Daddy. I am not a baby." Lillian laughed and scooped the little girl up into her arms. "He asked me," she confirmed, "and I said yes." Nora's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Does that mean you are going to be my new mama?" Lillian looked at Cole. He gave a small nod. "If you want me to be," Lillian said softly. "I will never try to replace your first mama. She will always be special. But I would be honored to be your second mama, if you will have me." Nora pretended to think about it for about half a second. "Yes," she declared. "I will have you." Then she hugged Lillian so tight that Cole had to gently pry her loose so they could all go inside and have supper. They got married on a Sunday in late spring, when the wildflowers were blooming across the hills and the creek was singing its loudest song. The ceremony was small and simple. Sheriff Garrett came along with his wife. Old Mrs. Patterson was there, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. A few other neighbors showed up, people who had heard the story and wanted to witness the happy ending. The minister was a young man from the church in Cedar Hollow. He had kind eyes and a voice that carried well on the open air. Lillian wore a dress she had made herself from fabric Cole bought her in town. It was pale blue with white lace at the collar. Her hair was braided with wildflowers woven through. Cole thought she had never looked more beautiful. Nora stood beside them, serving as both flower girl and witness. She took her job very seriously, clutching a small basket of petals and scattering them at exactly the right moments. The vows were simple. "Do you, Cole Whitaker, take this woman to be your wife?" "I do." "Do you, Lillian Hart, take this man to be your husband?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Cole kissed Lillian while their small audience cheered and Red barked, and Nora threw the rest of her petals into the air like confetti. Afterward, there was food and laughter and music from an old fiddle that Mrs. Patterson's husband played. People danced in the yard while the sun went down and the stars came out one by one. Late that night, when the guests had gone home and Nora was asleep in her bed, Cole and Lillian sat together on the porch. The ranch was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt like peace instead of loneliness. Lillian leaned her head against Cole's shoulder. "A year ago," she said softly, "I was sleeping in barns and wondering if I would survive the winter. I had nothing, no home, no family, no hope." Cole wrapped his arm around her. "And now," he asked. Lillian smiled. "Now I have everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. Crickets singing, an owl calling from somewhere in the trees, the soft breathing of Red at their feet. Cole thought about the letter again, the one he had written in his darkest hour, the one that had somehow found its way across miles and years to bring this woman to his door. He still did not know how it happened. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was Miriam watching over them. Maybe it was just the universe deciding that two broken people deserved a chance to make each other whole. In the end, it did not matter how. It only mattered that it did. 5 years passed. The ranch had grown. Cole had bought the neighboring parcel of land and added more cattle. The vegetable garden had tripled in size. There was a new chicken coop that Nora had helped build herself. Nora was 10 years old now, tall for her age, with her mother's dark hair and her father's steady eyes. She had started helping with the real work of the ranch, learning to ride and rope and mend fences. She still kept the cloth rabbit on her bed, though she would never admit it to anyone. Lillian had changed too. The haunted look was long gone from her eyes. In its place was a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. She had taught herself to keep the ranch's books, and had become known throughout Cedar Hollow for her skill with a needle. Women came from miles around to have her make dresses and mend precious garments. But the biggest change was running around the yard right now, chasing a butterfly. His name was Samuel. He was 3 years old, with curly brown hair and a laugh that sounded like music. He had Cole's stubborn chin and Lillian's gentle heart. Lillian watched him from the porch, her hand resting on her rounded belly. Another baby was coming in the fall. A girl, if the old wives' tales were true. Cole came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. Lillian smiled. "I was thinking about that first night," she said, "when I stumbled into your barn half frozen and certain my life was over." Cole pressed a kiss to her temple. "I remember," he said. "You looked like a ghost." Lillian laughed softly. "I felt like one. And then you opened that door and offered me warmth and food and kindness. No questions, no demands, just kindness." Cole was quiet for a moment. "That letter," he said, "the one I never sent. I have thought about it a lot over the years. I still do not know how it reached you." Lillian turned in his arms to face him. "Does it matter?" she asked. Cole shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I guess it does not." Samuel came running up to them, out of breath and beaming. "Mama," he shouted, "I almost caught it." Lillian laughed and scooped him up. "You will catch one someday," she promised. Nora appeared around the corner of the house, Red padding along beside her. The old dog was gray around the muzzle now, slower than he used to be, but still loyal to his bones. "Supper is almost ready," Nora announced. I set the table. Lillian smiled at her daughter. Her daughter. The word still made her heart swell. "Thank you, sweetheart." The family walked into the house together. The table was set for 5. Nora had put wildflowers in a jar in the center, the same kind that had been in Lillian's wedding bouquet. They held hands and said grace. They passed dishes and told stories and laughed at Samuel's attempts to eat peas with a spoon. After supper, Cole found Lillian at the window looking out at the land that had become her home. "Happy?" he asked softly. Lillian turned to him with tears in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Do you remember what you said to me once?" she asked. "That first week I was here, you said this place was not much." Cole nodded. "I remember," he said. Lillian reached up and touched his face. "You were wrong," she said. "This place is everything. It is where I found you and Nora. It is where I became a wife and a mother. It is where I learned that the worst day of your life does not have to be the end of your story." She smiled through her tears. "Sometimes love is not a fire that burns fast," she whispered. "Sometimes it is a lantern in a storm. And sometimes the letter you never send still finds its way home." Cole pulled her close and held her tight. Outside, the stars were coming out over the ranch. The land was quiet. The house was full. And somewhere in a drawer in the old writing desk, a worn and folded letter rested in peace, its work finally done. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.